Under the soft glow of high society parties, Margaret Campbell, Duchess of Argyll, was once England's brightest star. Her stunning beauty, glamorous gowns, and a smile that charmed the entire aristocracy made her unforgettable. But in the shadows, a secret lurked. In 1963, stolen Polaroid photos exposed her private life in a courtroom, turning the queen of society into the dirty duchess in the public's eyes. Who was the mysterious man in the photos? A powerful minister, a royal prince, or was it her betraying husband who orchestrated it all to destroy her? A servant once whispered. She kept a box, but no one dared open it. From the heights of fame, Margaret fell into a lonely abyss, dying in a nursing home with only faint memories of the spotlight. What pushed her into this tragedy? Join me to uncover the dark side of the Duchess of Argyll that no one's ever fully known. Chapter 1. Margaret's stunning beauty sparked a nightmare. London, 1930. Margaret Wigham, 18 years old, stepped into Buckingham Palace, her white gown sparkling, a strand of pearls gleaming at her neck. That night, presented to Queen Mary, she was crowned debutante of the year. A tabloid gushed, "Miss Wigham's so beautiful, even Scandal would wear a Cartier ring on her." But could that dazzling fame hide a dark secret, waiting to ruin her before the world? Born in 1912 in Scotland, Margaret was the only child of millionaire George Wigham. Her father, a self-made man, cherished her like a precious gem. But her mother, Helen, was cold and harsh, criticizing Margaret for her stutter and lack of brains. "Don't read books, you'll ruin your eyes," Helen snapped, fearing glasses would dim her daughter's beauty. In New York, where Margaret grew up, the Hudson River's ship horns echoed each night. She wrote that their sound called her to escape this world, even before she'd truly lived. At 15, Margaret faced a mystery no one dared mention. During a holiday on the Isle of Wight, she met actor David Niven. Her family never spoke of it, but an old servant recalled. The mistress burned a letter that night, her hands shaking so much she couldn't light the third match. Margaret returned pale and never mentioned David again. A secret was buried, but its pain quietly gnawed at her heart. By 1930, Margaret burst onto the scene like a phenomenon. Her debutante ball cost £4,000, with Paris gowns and 400 guests crowding in. Rumors swirled that a PR firm was hired to craft her sweet heiress image. The press dubbed her the IT girl, rivaling Hollywood stars. But was that title born from public love, or staged behind the scenes at a ball? She met Prince Ali Khan, a dashing figure in white robes and a turban. Her heart fluttered. They danced, exchanged love letters. Ali proposed, but her father said no. The recorded reason was unsuitable, but a close friend hinted. Some things an aristocratic family would never allow in their lineage. Society's pressure weighed heavy. Margaret had to be perfect, beautiful, stylish, and destined for a prestigious marriage. "I just want to be loved," she wrote in her diary. Amid 400 guests at a Paris ball, one person wasn't invited: Margaret's true self. Each night, the Hudson's ship horns echoed in her mind, reminding her that where she truly belonged might not be here. Cracks that makeup couldn't hide were forming cracks that would later be exposed as evidence in a public trial. Could a shining star keep glowing as darkness began to creep in? Chapter 2. Deep pain was just the beginning. Egypt, 1931. Margaret Wigham, 19, had just basked in the glow of debutante of the year. In the golden desert, she met Glenn Kidston, a dashing pilot who made her heart race. But one afternoon, a newspaper screamed, "Kidston killed in plane explosion." Margaret, fresh from a photo shoot, stood in a sand-filled room, trembling as she dropped an unopened letter. Just days before, she'd ridden horses with Glenn, her hair flying, hearing his promises, "I'll divorce to marry you." A servant said Margaret hid those letters under her pillow, as if afraid someone would steal them. Sneaking into his funeral, sitting in the back, she wept silently, banned by Glenn's wife. "I could have been happy forever," she wrote in her diary. That pain thrust Margaret into a whirlwind of parties. After the funeral, She didn't return to London. She was spotted on a ship's deck, toasting with strangers, jazz filling the Mediterranean night. She sought new light in her 1933 wedding to Charles Sweeney, an American millionaire, at Brompton Oratory. The wedding drew 20,000 onlookers, dubbed the event of the decade by the press. A servant said Margaret wore an old bracelet that day. One claimed it was a gift from a secret lover. Another said it was a charm from the cradle of a lost child. Margaret never confirmed. Happiness didn't last. 8 miscarriages and a stillborn daughter in 1933 left her blaming herself. "I'm a failed woman." Charles, jealous and controlling, couldn't comfort her. They divorced in 1947, leaving 2 children, Francis and Brian. Society demanded she be the perfect wife, but personal pain fueled her rebellion. She dove into champagne and bright lights, seeking solace in others' arms. Women like her should behave, a society matron whispered at a party. One night, a servant overheard Margaret on the phone. Her voice shook, breaking mid-sentence. If they knew the truth, the whole world would turn away. The Hudson's ship horns, like an omen, echoed in her mind, reminding her happiness was fleeting. "I just want to feel alive," she once said, clutching a champagne glass, as if letting go would shatter everything. Loss and social pressure left her vulnerable, ready to plunge into dangerous relationships, a friend recalled. She looked in the mirror, muttering, "If they saw those photos, they'd never forgive me." Was love ever her salvation, or just a path to greater tragedy when love crumbled? Would Margaret find light or fall deeper into darkness? Chapter 3. Injustice turned the Duchess into the Dirty Duchess. London, 1963. A stifling courtroom, eyes boring into her. Ian Campbell, Duke of Argyll, stood and presented 13 Polaroid photos. Margaret, naked except for a pearl necklace, stood beside a faceless man. The crowd gasped. Ian accused her of affairs with 88 men, from ministers to royals. Judge Lord Wheatley, voice icy, called her a promiscuous woman with perverse desires. The Daily Mail ran a red headline: "Pearls and betrayal, Duchess loses throne to lust." The Sun screamed. "Dirty Duchess," a reporter said that after the hearing. Margaret left, clutching a small notebook, as if it held her final secret. The 1963 divorce, dubbed the divorce of the century, destroyed Margaret. Ian, whom she married in 1951, was once a charming man met on a train from Paris, but after the wedding, he revealed his true self: alcoholic, abusive, and drowning in debt. When their marriage collapsed, Ian vowed to drag her down. He hired a locksmith to break into Margaret's New York drawer, stealing her diary and Polaroids. Once, he pinned her to the bed while his daughter Jeanne, from a previous marriage, rifled through the drawer as Margaret slept under dim golden light. Jean was 15. Margaret never forgave the betrayal by a child she'd once loved. The biggest mystery: who was the headless man Duncan Sandys? Defense Minister Douglas Fairbanks Jr., Hollywood star, or Prince Philip? As whispered in Power's corridors, a journalist recalled, some said the government stepped in to hide the man's identity. Lord Denning investigated handwriting from 5 suspects but reached no conclusion until her death. Margaret never named the man. Some said she kept his photo in a silver frame, face down, in her bedside cabinet. Ian, despite his violence and affairs, faced little blame. Margaret, however, was vilified, labeled depraved. The 1960s gender bias crushed her, making her a sacrificial lamb for social norms. "I felt stripped bare before the world," she wrote in her memoir, "not for being unclothed, but for having nothing left to hide." Margaret sat in her room, dim light on cruel headlines. "They don't understand me," she muttered, tears falling. The Hudson's ship horns, an omen from her New York days, echoed in her mind, recalling a world that had turned away. The scandal didn't just steal her reputation, it tore her heart. A friend said she looked in the mirror, muttering, "If they saw those photos, they'd never forgive me." But who was behind it all? Ian's plot? Or had Margaret trapped herself? Was she a victim of a conspiracy? Or the architect of her own tragedy? Or, worse, both? Chapter 4 Fame's Heaviest Price Mayfair, 1965. Margaret sat alone in a small apartment, faint light on a face once iconic. Tabloids still called her the fallen Duchess. High society, where she once shone, now shunned her. Her daughter Frances, ashamed of the scandal, was cold. At a party, Margaret said, "Darling, it's me." Frances turned away, saying curtly, "I know." A servant said she dropped a handkerchief embroidered with an M as if losing her identity. The Hudson's ship horns, an omen from New York, echoed, reminding her of a world no longer welcoming. The 1963 divorce took everything. Margaret paid £50,000, a fortune then, to survive. She opened her Mayfair home for tours at £7.50, but few came. She hosted cocktail parties, sold signed books, but guests' eyes held pity. A servant said Margaret kept a secret box with letters from the headless man. She once planned to reveal the truth but stayed silent, as if fearing reopened wounds. A friend recalled her whispering, "If I spoke, all of Westminster would shake." Was it a confession or a broken heart's memory? Society didn't forgive. Women like her don't deserve respect. A matron said at a party. A tabloid reporter noted. Rumors said the government sealed some divorce files to protect big names. Margaret felt violated, not just by Ian, but by the world. They see only scandal. "Not me," she wrote. The 1960s gender bias crushed her, casting her out. Once a dazzling duchess, she was now her own shadow, a friend said. She looked out the window, muttering about a man who never came. "If I hadn't opened that drawer," she said, "maybe they wouldn't have known." Margaret heard laughter from old champagne-soaked parties. Now, there was only silence, the Hudson's horns, a harsh reminder. Pulled her back to brighter days. She clung to scraps of dignity. But society had judged. Could she find any light? Or would darkness swallow all when the world turned away? What did Margaret do to hold on to her last flicker of light? Chapter 5. Margaret's Secrets Slowly Unravel, Paris, 1975. Margaret, now in her 60s. Sat in a quiet bookstore signing "Forget Not, I was a silly rabbit." "Easily fooled," she wrote, her eyes full of regret, as if seeing mistakes that plunged her into the abyss. A bookstore clerk said she left behind a diary page, scrawled, "If they knew that man's name, all London would never forgive, especially those behind the curtain of power." The Hudson's ship horns, an omen from New York, echoed, pulling her to days when fame still shone. Margaret's darkest secret emerged. Ian, her husband, found her diary, uncovering her plan to adopt a child to pose as their son, protecting her and her father's investment in Inverary Castle. She also forged letters from Ian's ex-wife, Louise, to cut his son from inheritance. "I just wanted to keep what was mine," she defended, voice trembling. Ian struck back viciously, teaming with Secretary Yvonne Macpherson, once Margaret's confidant, to sue for slander. A servant said Ian smirked in the dark her diary will be the blade that ends her. He even plotted to declare her insane to seize her assets. Margaret was trapped by her own mistakes. "I trusted too much," she told a friend, eyes red. A servant said she sent anonymous letters to herself, accusing Ian over inheritance. But their familiar handwriting chilled her, as if facing her own sins. Society judged she brought it on herself. A paper wrote. The 1960s gender bias crushed her, exiling her from the elite, a friend recalled. She stood before a mirror, muttering, "If I hadn't kept that diary, they wouldn't know the truth about that man." In a dim room, Margaret clutched her old diary, as if holding the past. The Hudson's horns, a harsh reminder, pulled her to days of stage lights. She was both Ian's victim and her tragedy's author. Which secret truly destroyed her? Or did she cage herself in fame and mistakes? What secret broke Margaret? Or did she lock herself in darkness? Chapter 6. A Lonely End, St. George's Nursing Home, London, 1993. Margaret, 80, sat in a small room, wearing haute couture, hair perfectly styled. She gazed at passers-by, eyes distant. refusing lunch at 12 o'clock. Only servants eat now. A nurse said she held her hand, murmuring, "They never found him. Did they the man in the photo? The Hudson's ship horns, an omen from New York, echoed, pulling her to days when light still shone." Margaret's life was now a shadow. After the divorce, she lived at Grosvenor House Hotel, hosting cocktail parties for £16, selling signed books to survive. But guests dwindled, and she entered the nursing home, owing the bank £26,000. She sank into memories, telling a friend, "I'm on the Queen Elizabeth, 3 days from Southampton." A nurse said that before dying. Margaret muttered about the man never named, the headless man, or a greater secret. Society forgot her, just a scandal's memory, a paper wrote. Margaret felt violated, not just by Ian, but by time and oblivion. The 1960s gender bias, like a curse, lingered, a friend said. She looked at old photos, whispering, "If I hadn't opened that drawer, they wouldn't know the truth about him." But she held her pride, an unyielding duchess, though only her shadow remained. On July 25th, 1993, Margaret died, alone in her small room. A servant said she clutched an empty silver frame, as if guarding one last secret. The Hudson's horns, a faded melody, sounded one final time. Did she carry her biggest secret to the grave? Or was her death just a quiet full stop, conclusion, a legacy, and lingering mysteries? Brookwood Cemetery, Surrey, 1993. Margaret's grave lies quietly beside Charles Sweeney, her first husband. A single white rose rests on it, its sender unknown. Margaret Campbell, Duchess of Argyll, once a symbol of beauty and fame, is now a memory. But her story lives on. A friend said that before dying. Margaret whispered, "They'll never know the whole truth about that man." The Hudson's ship horns, a whisper from the past, still echo, recalling a life of light and shadow. The 1963 divorce wasn't just a scandal. It was a cultural milestone. It exposed England's gender injustice, where women like Margaret faced harsher judgment than men. The 2021 series A Very British Scandal, with Claire Foy as Margaret, portrayed her as a victim of bias, a woman who dared to live authentically but was punished. "I have no regrets," Margaret once said. But her eyes told another story. The 1960s gender bias, a sharp blade, cut away any chance to reclaim her honor. Margaret's legacy is a lesson on fame's cost. She defied norms, refusing to be a docile wife or perfect lady, but society didn't forgive. "They saw only scandal, not me," she wrote. Her story reminds us that glamour often hides darkness, and resilience can cost loneliness. She stood under stage lights but ended alone in a small room, the Hudson's horns echoing in her mind. The greatest mystery remains unsolved. Who was the headless man, Duncan Sandys, Douglas Fairbanks Jr., or Prince Philip? As whispered in Power's halls, a journalist said the British government may have hidden the truth to shield elites. A friend recalled Margaret keeping a box of secret letters, lost after her death. Was it the final clue, or just a faded memory? The Hudson's horns, a faded melody, seemed to know the answer but stay silent. Margaret left a contradictory legacy, a woman both fierce and fragile, victim and author of her tragedy. She once said, "I just wanted to be loved." But that love slipped away, choked by social pressure and personal mistakes. A nurse said that in her final days. Margaret looked out the window, muttering, "If I hadn't opened that drawer, things might have been different." Today, we see not just a scandal but a person. Margaret Campbell, with all her glory and pain, reminds us that behind every spotlight is a heart fighting to be seen. Could she have escaped tragedy in a fairer society, or was her fate sealed from the start? Share your thoughts. Was Margaret a victim of her time? Or did she bring on her own tragedy? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more hidden historical tales. Thanks for joining me in the world of the Duchess of Argyll, where light and shadow are forever entwined.